Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to be joined by my friend Michael Shpizner today. And today we had an interesting thing that we wanted to do. Sometime back, Michael stumbled across a SmithyQ video that used a unique type of analysis to analyze a chess game. And so, what we wanted to do today is use that technique, and we'll describe it when we start off. And then, after we're done using his technique to analyze the game, we're going to incorporate Michael's WTF WOW thought process to see how we could have figured out those positions and what his algorithm would have caught. And I think it'll be a really interesting process. So if you haven't watched the previous videos that I've done with Michael, I'll put links to those. You'll be able to click on those right above me or down in the show description. And the video by SmithyQ, I'll put a link to that above me as well. So that'll pop up here shortly. And it will also be in the show description. So how are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing well. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. And so what this SmithyQ video was, to make to kind of put it in a nutshell, is at some point he found this idea where you take a game and you analyze it in chunks. So instead of going through each move sequentially, one move at a time, he chooses a number of moves, anywhere from maybe like 4 to 6 moves at a time, or maybe even more. And he looks at them in snapshots and he tries to analyze the position. You can maybe write down your evaluation. If you want to do it in a computer fashion, that's fine. Maybe plus 0.5 for white or something. Or you can just say, okay, it looks like normal opening advantage for white, or it looks even or slightly better for black, etc. And then the idea is when you make your way through the game, when you get to the end, then you look at the chunks where your evaluation of the position changed significantly, and you try to deconstruct it. So the idea being is you see the position fresh, like ideally, like for Michael and I, we're going to do 2 games that neither one of us have analyzed. We're just going to go through it in the chunks. We know the outcome, of course, but so we use games between club players because we're club players, and we're hoping that they're interesting games. We don't know. We hope it's not a dud, but so we tried to choose an interesting opening. And so is there anything you wanted to add, Michael? Did I kind of cover the process?
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I think the only thing I would add is just an observation that those of us who are improving adult players at the club level, we've all heard that the ability to evaluate a position is a key chess skill, and I think that's right. And there's a lot of videos out there, YouTube videos, about how to evaluate a position. But what I've never seen yet is a video where 2 people evaluate a position together with a kind of a back and forth. And in this case, I'm a sort of beginner trying to get my nose into the intermediate level. Brock is a much stronger player than I am. And so I think it'll be interesting, I hope, and instructive, I hope, to see the 2 of us kind of back and forth about how we would evaluate each of these positions when we go from chunk to chunk. And I think that in and of itself will be interesting. Then we go back, once we've identified a particular chunk where there was a significant change in the evaluation, then we go back, and I like to think of it, SmithyQ may have used this expression in his original video. I think of it as putting on our Sherlock Holmes hats, and we're going back over this chunk, move by move, just these 4 moves, and trying to figure out where exactly did the evaluation change. One of the players obviously made a mistake. Well, where was that mistake, and can we use the WTF WOW thought process algorithm to identify that mistake and to identify what that player should have played instead? So that's kind of what we're after here.
And you can't see it, Michael, but I do have a copy of your algorithm blown up on the screen that people will, be able to refer to as we go through it. And like I said, we did do well, we did one full video where you talked about your algorithm and the genesis of it and how it's used, and then we did a video together where we kind of put it in motion to play against a bot. So, like I said, both of those videos will have links to them here. So, all right, you ready to roll?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we're gonna start with the first chunk, and I guess we'll do it when after Black's fourth move every 4 moves. I think that would be an appropriate amount of chunks. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right, so this is chunk 1. So interesting. So, what do you think?
Well, I would say I think it's a pretty equal position. Each player has one minor piece developed. All the others are still back home. Nobody has any more space than the other one, so it's a very symmetrical. In fact, it's a completely symmetrical position. So I think the evaluation has not changed since the beginning. So that would mean white would be up just a little, like 0.2 or 0.3.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The interesting thing, I think it's going to be interesting how it develops, right? It could become completely symmetrical. It could have the tension sit there for a while. One side could choose to give the other side an Isolani, or one side could try to take on the isolated queen pawn. So
Yeah,
I think it'll be really interesting to see what the next chunk is, because that will really kind of give us some insights on where the game is going.
yeah. And Brock, let me make one other point about the chunking process that SmithyQ introduced. Um, it's quite possible that within a given chunk, like in our case here, we're looking at the first 4 moves of the game as one chunk. It's possible, probably not in the very first 4 moves, but in any given 4-move sequence later in the game, it's possible that the evaluation changed dramatically back and forth within that chunk. In other words, maybe Black made a mistake and gave a significant lead to White, but White made a mistake right after that and gave the lead right back to Black, or brought it right back to neutral. The chunking approach would not catch that. So let's just be clear right up front. We talk about identifying 2 chunks where the evaluation changed significantly, but it's possible that there are lots of changes, significant changes in evaluation that we would never know about because of the chunking approach.
Yep. And it also wouldn't pick up something where an opportunity was, like a tactical opportunity was presented to one of the players in between the chunks and they didn't capitalize on it. And then that
Exactly.
dynamic kind of potential dissipates.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Jump, jump to chunk 2.
ooh,
Oh, interesting.
interesting.
All right. Let me take a first stab, and then you
Yep.
can correct me or add your insight. I would say that Black has just gained some space on the queen side, uh, and that's an advantage to Black. On the other hand, White now has 3 minor pieces developed, and Black only has 1. So Black has made a lot of pawn moves while White has been developing minor pieces. I don't think that that's sufficient justification or compensation for the space on the queen side. Let me say it the other way. I don't think Black got enough compensation for the lack of development. So I'm going to say White is ahead here because of that advantage in development, and also because the center at this moment is still pretty open. The pawns are not locked in any way. White has a semi-open e-file. Black has a semi-open D file. And so that lead in development might be a real advantage to white. And so I would say white is probably up, maybe one pawn's worth or one and a half even.
I agree with you 100%. So normally, right, with the isolated queen pawn, white has the advantage in space, and they need to use that space to try to get some kind of dynamic advantage, whether it be attacking on the king side or pushing d5 to bust open the position. And
Right,
the idea is white wants to have their more freedom of mobility for their pieces and be able to move them around to, ideal squares. Whereas black has less space, but they have the better pawn structure if it gets to an endgame right, and then this d pawn becomes a
right,
target. And so
right,
I think your observation from the little bit of studying I've done so far on this is very astute, because I think I agree with you 100%. That is a lot of time to spend on two moves without developing any pieces.
right. And Brock, unlike every other video in the history of YouTube, chess video, we are not going to be talking about what's the best move for white here.
Right, right.
Not the nature of our process. All we're going to do is just observe and evaluate, and then we're going to move on to the next chunk and see if there was a significant change. So, you're agreeing that maybe what do you want to call it, 1.3 for white?
I would guess like maybe zero point 0.9, 1. I mean, we're cutting hairs. I think 1 is close enough. Could be anywhere zero
All
point
right,
0.8 to
let's give
1,
it a
I would guess.
1.0. Cool. And now, so the big question for our process, Brock, is this enough of a differential from the earlier chunk to warrant putting on our Sherlock Holmes hats? And I would say no on this one. I think without even going through the moves one at a time, you and I have already identified the issue. The issue is black has made some pawn moves that white countered with minor piece development. So the big challenge for white here is, can white take advantage of the being ahead in development quickly enough before black can catch up in development? And from black's point of view, black is going to want to develop quickly to make up for the fact that he's made the pawn moves, but he still has 3 out of his 4 minor pieces on the first rank.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think, all right, with that, I would jump to the next chunk here.
Okay, I'll move us ahead. We'll see what we get.
All right, so we're looking at black's move 12,
Okay.
b4.
Interesting.
Huh, huh, huh.
So, what's interesting is, okay, so somehow black. Well, I'll let you go first. And there's no
So,
rush. We can take our time to digest it a little bit.
hmm, so we can kind of figure out what happened here. Black's b pawn used to be on b5 in chunk 2, and black's light squared bishop was on c4. So white moved his bishop back to b3, and then black advances b pawn yet again, another pawn move. Now he's attacking white's knight on c3. But also black has pretty much caught up, or almost caught up in development. He now has 3 minor pieces out to white's 4. However, I would notice that white's development, let me put it this way, white's developed pieces are deeper in black's camp than black's developed pieces are. So his bishop on e7 is really not doing much at all other than breaking the pin on the f6 knight. And his f6 knight, I don't see that it really has much to do where it's at right now. Now his b7 bishop, light squared bishop, is very strong, even though it's only on the second rank. On the other hand, black's knight on c3 and black's knight on e5, I think, are stronger than both of black's knights. So for all those reasons, I would say that white is still ahead in development. I mean, it's still ahead in evaluation. I'm not sure I would go so far as to maintain that 1.0. I think black has caught up a little bit, and I'd still give white the advantage, maybe zero point 0.5 or zero point 0.6.
Yeah, interesting. And you know what's really interesting about this, and I won't get off topic, is I usually don't watch like high level chess events, but I did watch a good chunk of the last round of the candidates.
Oh, cool.
And this happened after, you know, I put these games in this study for us. But Gukesh, the position is very similar to one that Hikaru played in the last round against Gukesh. And
Huh,
that came out of a Queen's Gambit accepted. And Gukesh played this B4 move.
huh.
Trying to just, take that seat, trying to, wrestle for control, I think, of this D5 square. Because the D5 square is kind of the battleground, right? Like, black would like to try to hold on to that square. And by hitting this
Hmm.
knight, it takes pressure off of that square, making it harder for white to play D5.
Hmm.
And so I kind of agree with you. Like, I think I'd say put it down to like maybe, yeah, like still a slight advantage for white, but not what it was. This will be a really interesting one for us to see what the ultimate truth is at the end.
Right. All right. So let's pick a number. Would you call it plus zero point 0.5, plus zero point 0.6?
Yeah, I'd say 0.5 ish.
Let's do it. All right. Cool. Let's jump on to the next chunk.
All right.
Move 16.
Ooh,
Ooh. Look at that knight on B8. Wow. Move 16.
right.
And a player rated 1689, I guess a sort of intermediate level, has not moved that knight. Wow.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, white has accomplished a nice little battery, queen and bishop battery on the light squares.
Yep.
And black just made this weird move, which I would think is, weakening his kingside castle. No?
Yeah, so he's got G6 and H6.
Right.
So he must have played H6 to try to get rid of the bishop on G5, and the bishop on G5 took on F6, and then he recaptured with the bishop. The question is so
Mm.
he's probably, well, I guess we should just analyze the position, but
Right.
so
Now, by the way, neither of us mentioned yet that black has the bishop pair,
mhm.
for what that's worth. And, this still remains a pretty open position. Like I said earlier on, there's a wide open C file now, and there's a semi-open D file for black and a semi-open E file for white. So there's open files, um, and because of that, there's also open diagonals. So I would think those bishops are pretty strong. Now, white is probably looking at this lovely outpost on C5 for one of his knights, if he wanted it. Which he could reach in one move, knight to C5. Um, but anyway, we don't want to get into analyzing what the best move is. We just want to evaluate. Um, so white has three pieces developed, although that knight on A4, sort of weird to call that developed. He's way on the rim.
Actually
But he is one move away from a lovely outpost on the queen side.
that's a very good point. So black has two pieces developed. We have one, two, three, four pieces on their optimal squares versus, and you can say maybe give this, I don't know, quarter of a development point or something. I don't know exactly, but so a little over four and 4 of them on their ideal squares, and black has a bishop. This knight would have been a better blockader. One of the knights, probably this knight here would have been a better blockader than the bishop, but at least it's a blockader.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
And so to me, well, you can finish here what you think, but to
Well, let me
me,
just, so given all of that, I'm going to say I think white still has an advantage. I don't think it's changed significantly from the plus +0.5 that we saw in the last chunk, but it's still, I think, white's advantage. So over to you.
yeah, I think, um, I think it's probably close to a winning advantage.
Really?
Yeah,
Winning is in
because
like 3.0 or something?
yeah, I don't know exactly, but I think like
Wow.
in like a grandmaster's hands or something, or just like a
So
master's hands.
say more about that. What exactly are the super
Yeah, so
strengths
so
you see?
so if we look at this, ultimately with these IQP positions, we're looking for dynamic potential, right? He has this D5. We can't push D5 for the moment. That's one source. But the most, um, our dream is white in these isolated queen pawns is to use this extra space to position our pieces so that we can attack the black king. And I see this as okay. He's created weaknesses in front of his king, so we have targets. He no longer has this knight on f6, which is the best defender of the king. So ironically, he has the 2 bishops, but it's actually, I think it might actually be a negative instead of a positive because the knights are better at defense around the king
Hmm,
than the bishops. And
hmm.
he can't, like this knight will take some time to come over. And so I feel like white um, can use this advantage in space and development for a kingside attack, probably. So my guess is sacking right here probably works,
Wow.
right? Because you're going to get 3 pawns for it, and then his king is just laid open bare. And then we can lift rooks in.
That's great thinking.
Yeah. So this is kind of like a good example, I think, of like a. It's similar to an example I saw in one of the in a can't remember which book, but I've been kind of going through some different source material on the IQP, and
Hmm.
I know a lot of times you see these that some of the examples came out of Queen's Gambit accepted positions where they spent time on A6 and B5, and it's hard to justify that if they don't play things absolutely perfectly.
Hmm.
So my guess is I don't know, but I would say +3,
Wow.
maybe,
Well, I will
maybe
certainly
more,
defer.
maybe more, maybe less. I don't know. It depends if there's like it depends if there's an actual knockout. I don't know that,
This is going to be a really good chunk to analyze, to go back on
right?
between chunk 3 and chunk 4, because there was a very significant change in evaluation.
Right, because
Let
I
me just
think for
let me
I
just
think for
raise
black, I
let
think
me
for
raise
black,
one counter to that, if I
yeah,
may. Um, you and I both said that White has moved 2 pawns in front of his king, and that has weakened his king side, his king's safety. He's compromised his king's safety. However, let me just point out both of the moves were weakening of the dark squares
hmm
and actually strengthening, or well, the last move, the G6 move, is not weakening the light squares, right? It's weakening the dark squares, and white doesn't have a dark squared bishop. Does that change anything?
um, well, I know that in the IQP, this is the important bishop. If you
Hmm.
lose the bishop, that can go on this diagonal and this diagonal. These are the 2 diagonals that you tend to get your attacks on. because
Yep.
you can coordinate it with your knight on e5 and your queen. So um, usually there's still good attacking potential without the dark squared bishop.
Yep. And
So, and
especially
I think
because
the other
we've
thing
got
is
that monster knight on e5 and black hasn't moved. He's lost his g8 knight and he hasn't yet moved his b8 knight.
right. Yeah, so the question is it would require calculation, and we don't want to spend time on calculation, but like I think white can already consider take, take, bishop back and get 2 pawns for the piece, and then start ideas like this.
Well, right.
Like I don't know exactly how it plays out, but this should be very, very good for black, just based, or for white, based on the lead in development, the extra space, the lack of the knight for defense, and the weakened pawns that can be attacked.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, I just entered 3.0 for chunk four.
We'll see.
Cool.
The
And we'll
computer
make a
probably
note
maybe the computer can defend it, but
right. All
but
right, and we'll make a mental note that we want to go back to chunk three and use those four moves to figure out where did black go wrong.
agreed.
All right, let's
All
jump
right, let's
to
go
chunk
to the
five.
next chunk.
For purposes of the anyone who might be watching this, there only are 6 chunks in this entire game, so we're getting close to being done with the chunking piece.
Interesting.
All right, so last move is king to f6. Oh, look at that! White did eliminate all those pawns around black's king. Um, huh,
So now comes the
huh,
moment of
huh,
truth, I guess.
huh, huh. Interesting that white's knight is still on a4. And look at this, black's knight is still on b8.
Right.
Move 20, and black has not moved his knight.
What's
Um,
interesting is my intuition as white was to not play like the queen to h7 and flush his king to the center. Mine was to transport my rooks to like the
yeah,
G and H file and try to like maybe sacrifice a rook to bash through. Try to keep him over on the king side where he can't transport defensive pieces there quickly enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The problem is it's going to be hard for white to enter the f file with a rook, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because he can't go to f3. He can't get to f4 because he'd have to go through e4 that he can't do. And he can't really go to, and he can't go to f5 because of the pawn on e6. So the f file is really not available to him in this position.
On the other hand, to me, f4 looks really strong because like the king can't run to the e file yet, or we would, or the bishop hangs. And if you can get in f4, f5, you might be able to overwhelm him on the e6 square because your knight can come to c5, your other rook can come in to the e file.
Another thing that's interesting, if we can, well, again, I don't want to fall into what's white's best move here. That's not the name of the game.
Right.
But if white moves his light squared bishop pretty much anywhere that's safe, like d3 or even h5, putting the queen on g6 would be pretty amazing.
Right. I agree. There's like different ways to go about this. And,
But back to evaluation.
yeah,
So black still has the bishop pair, but that kind of pales in comparison to the fact that he's under strong attack by white.
right.
And without getting into the details of how is white going to, mount that attack, clearly white is in control here. White's got the initiative. There's lots of possibilities with the kingside pawns to bring them into play, or possibly a rook. Anyway, all right. So Would you say white is still up about the same amount or even stronger, even like beyond 3.0?
Yeah, I think it could be beyond. I mean, I think the computer is going to know the truth, so it's either going to be a really high number
Yeah.
or it's going to be closer to like equal. Depends if the attack works. My strong intuition is that it's a high number. To me, there should be some way to finish black off here because you can get,
Mhm.
both rooks into this attack quickly. You got your F pawn. Um, he's got to babysit that dark squared bishop. He's got to waste a move to do something, and it's not necessarily all that easy to do.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't see how black juggles the problem of his king and the bishop, you know, floating out there. I don't know. To me, it seems like probably it seems like it's improved more than plus 3 at this point.
You want to give it a +5?
I think that's reasonable.
Wow.
What do you think?
I'm deferring. Whatever you think is what I think.
Okay. Yeah, I don't
Clearly
know.
white
This
is
is
that.
this will really be a good one to see.
Yeah. So clearly white has a winning advantage. The only question is how much, but
Yeah.
okay.
See,
All
I'm not a
right,
good
let's
attacking
jump
player, or
to
I haven't been an attacking player, and I'm trying to learn it. So my intuition isn't that strong, and that's why I'm kind of studying these
yeah,
IQP
good.
positions to try to get a better feel for these type of things.
All right, good for you. All right, so let's jump to the sixth and final chunk.
All right.
Huh, Black King has moved and congratulations, Black. You finally moved your your B8 knight.
Yeah,
So, what the heck is going on here? Ooh, it's looking bad
it is looking bad.
because um, hmm. Well, I don't know. All right, again, we don't want to get into how white would proceed. We just want to evaluate.
Unless we find a quick knockout, then I think we can.
Yeah.
Because to me, it looks like. I mean, I think I see a knockout.
If we could eliminate that light squared bishop and
Yeah,
also eliminate the pawn on the e file, oh boy.
exactly. That's exactly right. That's what I think. So I just see knight takes bishop, and if he takes back, you got rook e6, right? It's probably a higher number, but it's like it's
The
probably
maiden
gonna be
10, but
like
this,
plus, I don't know, 20 something or something.
oh, not a mate in X.
Yeah. I mean, if you let the engine run a long time, it would find it, but I don't think it'll
Right, I'm
show it to
sure.
us when we do the.
All right, let's just pick 20, plus 20. All
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
cool. All right, we have officially chunked. And by the way, just to finish out the game for fun, in the actual game, white did take d5, but unfortunately, black took e takes d5, and white found rook e6 mate. Nice.
Yeah.
Good
So that was
stuff.
kind of a
All
cool
right, but
game.
that was not. Yeah, so let's go back to. All right, our first episode of Sherlock Holmes is between chunk 3 and chunk 4, right?
Yes. So start at move 12, right?
Yep. So let's go back to Black's move 12, b4. And
B4.
now, just to remind everyone, including ourselves, of the process, we're going to go move by move, in fact, ply by ply, um, to figure out where did Black go wrong. Because at some point between chunk 4, he lost 2.5 pawns worth of value. All right, right?
Yeah.
So let's move by move. Here's knight a4 is the next move.
So knight A4.
So what weaknesses did that move create? Well, obviously it put a knight on the rim. It also gave up, well, it didn't really give up much in the way of control, right? Because where it used to be on c3, it wasn't controlling b5, it wasn't controlling e4, and it wasn't controlling d5.
But it did give up control of d5.
Well, d5?
D5, yep. So the knight on c3 helped control
Yeah,
this square.
but wouldn't you say that was already pretty well controlled by black, mostly by the pawn on e6?
Yeah, but like I think it's still worth noting because this square is everything in these formations.
Yeah.
So I guess I would look at it and be like, okay, well, because to me, we don't want to jump ahead, but like to me, I see a move that could kind of maybe keep black in the game here. But so we can leave this as debatable whether that's a weakness or not. But as white, I
Well,
kind of know I kind or as I kind
we
of
can
notes
certainly
that.
agree. We can certainly agree that White's knight on c3 was looking at d5. I don't think I would concede that it was controlling it, but it was looking at it, and now it isn't anymore. So that's a difference. That's a
Yeah.
weakness.
Well, we can use the word influencing. Um.
Yeah. Cool. All
So
right. So those are the weaknesses of that move from Black's that Black would observe. Now, on the algorithm, next thing is the T. What threats does that move present? Um, for example, it opens up the C file,
right.
and White, thanks to Black's delay in developing the B8 knight, White is much closer to grabbing that C file with his rook than Black is. So I think that's one threat, the threat of rook to rook to C1. Right? The threat doesn't always have to be with the piece that just moved. It could be, what threat did it create for other pieces?
Yeah.
The other threat, it's not an immediate threat, but we want to notice that the knight now hits B6. Black queen covers it, but that would be a way of attacking the rook on the A8.
Another thing is it's not necessarily huge, but the knight does now threaten to go to here, which could potentially be a sacrifice on this e6, which is very common in these isolated queen pawns. Not necessarily with this knight, but this is one of the critical diagonals. So
Yeah,
you can kind of
yeah,
imagine a situation where you get your queen on e2 and you sack this and they take back and you take back with check and then you may be able to attack something else and open up the discovery on this bishop.
yeah. You'd have white. Yep, yep, yep. Yeah, that's great.
So it is, I guess it is a little bit of a threat, although it's not immediate.
And I would say more. It's a longer term threat because C5 is an outpost, right? Black will never be able to move a piece with a pawn. Attack that piece with a pawn. So yes, his bishop on e7 is hitting c5, but he'd have to give up his bishop pair if he wanted to, and he would be repinning his f6 knight if he moved that bishop.
Yep, and
So I think
he'd be
knight,
fixing our kind of pawn. At least our pawn would be connected, even though this b4 pawn interrupts it. But it at least would be back to having two pawn islands.
that's a great point. Yep, yep, yep,
So that is a potential threat,
yep,
I would say. So maybe that
yep.
square wasn't when we first looked at it, we're kind of like the knight on the rim, but maybe there's more to it than we originally thought, because when it does come here, if it does come there, it is threatening this square. Bishop can't come here because knight comes here. If the bishop comes here, we could potentially swap it off if we wanted to. I don't know if that's the right move. actually, but and the knight here covers this square, so it does have some threats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, good. And then the second W, I'm sorry, the F is forcing moves. Yes, so we don't want to forget to consider what forcing moves does black have in this position. So let's quickly scan for checks. No. Captures. I don't see anything worthwhile. Bishop takes G2, doesn't do anything. The bishop is very strong where it is, just keep it there. Obviously, queen takes D4 is nothing. I think those are the only captures on the board for black. All right, so then we would move on to the wow part once we think
Yeah,
about
so black decided on this move, which I don't know, I'm not crazy about, but so let's see. So the wows. So what weaknesses does that create?
the move was bishop to D5, right?
Bishop to d5. Yep. So about the only thing it does, it's not real relevant, but it does take protection away from the a6 pawn. It does take protection away from the entry to the open file.
Yeah, nice.
I have a
And
guy
I think
here
more
too. There
importantly,
may be some
more
background noise. Just
importantly, no, I don't hear the background noise.
oh, I'm saying you may hear some because we have a guy putting in a new microwave.
Oh, okay.
So, but hopefully the noise reduction stuff will get rid of a lot of it.
The other, I don't know if we call it a weakness, but you are offering up that light squared bishop for a trade, and maybe black thought that was a worthwhile trade to get rid of that powerful bishop on B3, white's bishop, but you're giving up the bishop pair, and that bishop on G7, I'm sorry, B7, bishop on B7 was very strong, pointing towards the king, white's king, and attacking the G2 square. So that's a weakening move, I would say.
Yeah, because I think this file here is important too.
Yeah.
Control over that. I mean, it's not huge, but it's something.
All right. So I think the big question, Brock, is we've got our Sherlock Holmes hats on, have we found the point? Have we discovered the murderer?
I don't think quite yet.
Yeah, I do not think this move is the move that created tremendous shift in evaluation.
I think it extends White's advantage, but I don't think it's
Right.
maybe
But
fatal.
incrementally, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's skip over White's move, which is bishop to C2. So he's basically saying, I don't want to trade light squared bishops here, and maybe he's getting ready to play B3. That would further weaken black's light square bishop, and it would free up the A1 rook, which right now is babysitting the A2 pawn. Anyway, that's what white did, right? Any other comments on white's move, and then we'll jump to black?
No, I think so White has the long-term weakness of the isolated pawn, so they do not want to trade pieces. And it's pretty common that to establish this queen bishop battery
Right.
on this diagonal, and he may even
Yep.
be willing to just not even care about that pawn, let him waste time grabbing it.
Yep.
Because
In
the
fact, if
the
you,
other thing you have to remember is if he does take it and this bishop is here, he can always play b3 and potentially trap it in
right,
here.
or even if the queen is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right.
So let's see.
So let's do the WTF WOW for black now.
Yep.
Move 14.
So let's see.
So we're asking ourselves as black, what weaknesses did white's move, bishop to C2, what weaknesses did that create? Well, it no longer threatens to take the bishop on D5. it gives up defense of A2. I guess those are the main weaknesses.
Yeah.
And what threats does it create? Well, the threat you just mentioned of bishop takes H7 or queen to D3, which is a mating threat if we can get rid of the knight on F6.
So
those
that's one of my questions is this stuff, so hitting that weak pawn, right? Is there stuff in the air like this? Right? Because you imagine then he's gonna have to play this, and then then you get your stuff where we have sacrifices on this square.
Yep.
So to me, that's the threat.
Yeah.
And
So if we were black, how would we meet that threat? Would we perhaps play G6 here? Because that keeps the queen out of H5.
we may have to. The other thing is I wonder, the other potential thing would be to support that knight. So if takes, takes, then this is controlled by that knight.
That's really interesting. And then,
But you're right. I think they either have to do this or they have to do this. But I don't know if they can ignore that threat.
right. And what forcing move does black have in this position? And I think the answer is really nothing. There's no check. There's only one capture I can see on the entire board, and that's bishop takes G2, it's nothing. Or bishop takes A2, which is nothing. I don't see any forcing moves.
Right?
So then we go on to
the move they chose, right?
I think, as you said, one of those defensive moves is absolutely critical. But let's take a look at what black played here. Bam.
So they played H6.
So I'm going to nominate that move.
What's that?
As the turning point, or a turning point.
I think so. So let's see, what weaknesses does that create? Right? The first W, or the second, the first W, the second half.
Right.
So, well, it weakens your king position. It gives a hook.
I would say the biggest weakness that creates is it weakens the light squares around the king, particularly G6. The other thing is, I don't know if you really would call this a weakness, but it doesn't address the threat that we just identified.
Right.
We identified the threat of queen to D3, and that move does nothing to help. In fact, it hurts it.
And the other thing I think it does is it takes protection away from G6.
Yeah.
Right? And you need to protect on those light squares. You need protection to be there.
Yeah.
So this might be our Sherlock Holmes moment.
Yeah,
I think.
I'm nominating that move right there as the suicide moment.
Right. And then the effect on the other pieces. Well, not so much, but now we come to the key kind of moment, and can this move get whacked?
Right. Takes the knight. Very smart, because he recognizes that's a key defender. And he doesn't have his other knight yet on D7, so he's going to have to take back with either the pawn or the bishop. He won't have a knight there.
Right.
Oh, so
I
don't think this move by black requires much discussion, right? He's either going to recapture with the bishop or the pawn, is weak. His king's castle is weak enough as it is. He doesn't want to wreck it even more with taking back with the pawn and just opening up the G file. If he took back with the pawn, we'd probably play queen to G4 check, right?
Probably queen to H5.
Oh, nice. That's even better.
But I guess
And
we
I would
probably won't
say,
have time for the second game, so we can
no,
we
I
can
don't
turn the
think
engine
so.
on and look at the variations.
Yeah, let me just go back to one point, and that is from this point right here, H6, I think that's when white picked up at least a 3-pawn advantage. And so unless white makes a big mistake between here and the end of the game, white's going to win. And there was no mistake by white.
Right.
In fact, his advantage just grew between chunk point 4 and chunk point 5.
Right.
It just got worse and worse. So yes, in the interest of time and the attention of the two people who are still watching this, you want to go how do you want to work the engine analysis? Go all the way back to the
Well,
beginning, or
yeah. Well, I guess we could go to each of our chunks and just see how close we were, and then we can
that's
go
great.
through each move on this chunk that we just dissected.
Perfect.
With your,
Yeah,
what do you
let's do
think?
that.
Sound good?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Now
let's see. So at this one,
we're going to be on our own here because when we turn on the engine, that's just local for our own computer.
yeah, right.
But right now, Stockfish gives white a 0.3 advantage, which
Okay.
is
Mine says
exactly
point two, so
ah,
we're dead on.
yeah, excellent, good work.
So let's
Us,
look at this.
let's jump to the
Ooh.
B5 move.
Ooh, look at this. We
Plus
nailed it.
0.8 plus 0.9 plus 1.0. Excellent.
Yeah, mine says point seven. It's interesting how we have these different things, but it doesn't matter. We were
I think
correct.
mine is running slower than yours. I'm only up to depth 18 at the moment.
Okay, I'm on 25, and then it capped
Yeah,
off.
so I'll trust yours.
All right.
Yeah, mine just moved down to plus 0.8, but
And now
okay, we're in the ballpark.
this was the interesting one to me. This is what I think was the hardest to evaluate in this game potentially.
Which which one?
Is our
Chunk
next chunk?
three?
We thought maybe it went down to like a half a pawn.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, so
Interesting.
we were off on that. And so if we
Yeah,
had
it
more
says you're up.
time, this would be a good, like Smithy's advice would be to try to dig in and understand how we misevaluated this, right?
Yeah, because you know what the best move is here for white? Knight takes f7.
Yeah, interesting.
Wow.
That is very. This would be a great model game for
Yeah.
studying these IQPs.
Just for fun, we may not want to keep this in video. Just for fun, let's play this through for a couple of moves. Knight takes f7, rook takes f7. Now we play bishop takes e6.
Yeah,
Huh. Wow.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty nasty,
You're going to let me the exchange.
right?
But we start. We
Yeah,
don't even
there's just
bother with
nothing.
that
There's
right
just
now.
nothing
No
for him
rush.
here.
Interesting. Now we just go ahead and take that rook.
Yeah. And what's funny is we don't even have to
Excellent.
take it right away until he breaks that pin. We can just leave it sitting there and grab other stuff.
That's right. That's right.
So that's fascinating.
In fact, maybe a good move. Well, wait.
So
What
I
am I
think what
doing?
it
Arguing
is,
with stock.
what's interesting is if you don't notice if you don't notice that sacrifice, then it's only point 0.2 better. So if you played like knight to a4, it's only point 0.2 better for white. So what's really interesting
Huh.
is, we kind of evaluated it correctly, given that we didn't see this tactic.
Hmm.
Yeah, so this is where I was saying how if you see the sacrifice, then it's over a pawn better. But if you don't and you played the knight to a4, which is kind of like how we were evaluating it, then it's only
Yeah.
point 0.3 better for white, and we thought 0.5. So
Right.
that's pretty good. Because we're not
Right.
looking for. I mean, if we notice something, You know, like a tactic, we look at it, but that's not something we're going to notice till we study these more and spend a little more time on the game than we did.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah,
happy
yeah.
with that.
That was, if we were um, examining, you know, Brock, this is interesting. The next move for white, knight to a4, was actually a big mistake, right?
Only
It
because they
gives
didn't
up
see
a
the
one.
tactic.
Yeah. Well, no. Even bishop takes f6. It's not really a tactic, and that would be
Well,
a
it is a
1.2
tactic.
lead.
It does the same tactic a move later.
Yeah. But anyway, my only point is, if we were looking at this from White's point of view, we would have to say White's next move was a mistake.
Correct.
Knight to a4 is a mistake, but we didn't catch that because Black makes that move h6, which is also a mistake. In other words, this is a perfect
Yeah, yeah,
example of what
yeah.
we
From
said
what you were
earlier,
saying
that
early in the video.
the chunking technique can sometimes lose sight of um, mistakes that were made that are countered by a mistake on the other side. And this is a
Yep.
great example of that. So we didn't capture this as a mistake, but it was. Anyway, all right, so
So
the next
then
chunk
this was
was
our
bishop
next move, g6. Oh, wow. We're
yeah.
really kicking ass here.
Yeah.
No, really. I had written down that we thought it was +3, and
Yeah,
the computer says it's +3.8, taking on
not bad,
g6.
not bad. Yeah,
So,
very cool,
yeah, nice.
very cool. And let's just jump to the next chunk, chunk 5. We thought it was +20. What does Doctor say?
I think we thought it was +5. Oh no, this is. Oh yeah, yeah. You're right. This is
The king to
move
d6
18.
move.
Yeah, we thought it was +20. It says +6.
Whoa. Wait, are you on? No, no, I'm on. I skipped all the way to move
Yeah, you skipped the
24.
chunk.
Yeah. Oh, did I?
So
We
I
go
think our
back to
last
move
chunk.
20. Yeah, move 20 is when we said we were up 5.0.
Okay, and it's 6.
All right, all
That's really
right. We
good.
were definitely in the ballpark. That's
We
great.
did a lot better than I thought we would do because this is a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
computer-like position. So it's
yeah,
kind of weird that we came this close, to be honest.
yep. All right,
And
let's
then,
jump to chunk 6, move 24. I'm really curious to see. We just
yeah,
sort of threw up
yeah.
our hands.
Because at first we thought maybe there was a forced
Maybe,
mate, and then we calculated it deeper and determined there wasn't.
or at least not one we could see.
Right. And so
So,
we thought, well, interestingly, we thought this wasn't going to work because we pointed that out. And I didn't consider queen to d7 here. I thought
hmm,
this, and we couldn't determine a knockout, but it seemed like it was going to be overwhelming. We thought it was like 20 points better or something.
yeah,
Because I incorrectly visualized. I thought this. I thought we might be able to get away with this. But we can't. There's just not enough on it.
yeah.
But it doesn't much matter because we got stuff to grab all over. You
So
know,
what is Stockfish's evaluation after king to d6?
+6.
Wow, and we said +20.
Yeah.
Huh. So we were off on
But
that
see,
one.
that's where
We
I said.
thought
Remember,
white.
I said like the thing is against a human, it's probably +20. But the computer's going to
Right,
find every best potential defensive move
right,
because
right,
I'll
right, right.
guarantee, like, if we go through the sequence here, how many humans are going to play knight takes d4 here, right? You know, so you get one or two of those and you're at plus 20 real quick, I think. Like non-intuitive moves that the computer finds.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was pretty fun, huh?
That was fun. I'm going to come back to the room.
I think this is actually
Um,
a good game. It ended up we lucked out and picked a decent one. I mean, I'm sure there's ones where
it was a very good game.
there's more stuff, but I think that was pretty cool because it was dynamic and we kind of
It was a
isolated
great
that
game
h6
for our
move.
purposes. And so let's draw a conclusion or concluding words here.
Yeah, we're better than we
How do
think we
we
are.
think, how do we think the WTF WOW algorithm worked
I
for
think it
the
did its
Sherlock
job.
Holmes piece? And I think it worked pretty well. I think we were able to identify the mistakes that Black made that, cost Black the game.
And some things too is just I'm kind of excited to play these IQPs. I've been starting to play e4 and just aiming for these isolated queen pawns, just trying to play more dynamically. And
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is I realize this is a statistical aberration, but I've been playing unrated and I've just been playing aggressive with these things, with these queen pawns. And I have 16 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw in my last 18 games. And I
Oh,
realize like
God.
that's like a total, but it's kind of interesting and I'm just letting myself play these intuitive moves, where I don't have it all calculated out and I'm just kind of free willing it and just giving caution to the wind and just kind of going at the people. And I'm starting to wonder,
Wow.
like I don't think it'll hold up over time because I've been excited before thinking I'm on some big breakthrough or something. But what's interesting is I gave people way too much credit for their ability to defend positions. I think like that's one thing that Matt at Chess Schools has mentioned numerous times is that playing actively is so important at club level that like adult improvers we tend to not want to take risks and we want to play the solid move and not screw up. But I don't know. I'm curious to see how this pans out after because I'm going to do a real deep dive into these isolated queen pawns and I want to get to the point where, like, let's say take this game as an example, that knight takes f7 sacrifices on my radar, and I can just pound it out and just play it without calculating it all out. Just be like, oh, this seems right, you know,
Yeah.
bam, I'm going for it, and I'm gonna put the clock ticking on my opponent and let them try to figure out how to untangle from the mess.
Yeah, if you keep your opponent on their heels, they're not going to be like stockfish and coming up with the best resource. They're going to freak out most of the time.
Right.
So your last 18 games, when you had that amazing record, were those all against players that are about your level?
No, some of them were against. That's the thing is part of it is like you don't necessarily choose who you get, and I was
Yeah.
getting. I didn't have many like players higher rated than me, but what's encouraging for me is that like if you looked up my over the board record, I do better against 1900 players than I do against 1400 players. I've always been just terrible. Yes, it's no joke. Like I am terrible at playing people slightly lower rated than me. I'm just terrible at it. I'm terrible at finishing off. I'm terrible at like prosecuting a good position. Whereas like I'm
That's
better off
converting.
like not getting trying to hold on for dear life against a stronger player and then trying to swindle them under time pressure or something. I have better luck than I think that's different now because I haven't played over the board in like 4 years or something. So I think it would be different now
Hmm.
because I've studied so much since then. But that used to be my big weakness, and so like if I can get to the point where I can play more aggressively and just try to blow people off the board that I used to lose to because I would just flounder around trying to like not screw up the position instead of just going at them. Um, I think that's worth a couple hundred rating points just there. But
That's great.
It's kind of interesting.
All
Like
right,
so
well,
much
I've
of
got to,
chess is unintuitive, you know, like
yeah.
in deprogramming ourselves from our work careers, you know, thinking you can't make a mistake, like you in law and me in pharmacy, and it's just, well, you can make mistakes, you know, like you really
Risk
can
averse,
because
risk risk averse.
yeah.
um, I hope you do a video on the isolated queen pawn. That would be very instructive.
Yeah. No, I have ideas for it. My plan is I'm going to do a huge deep dive and I'm going to start assembling material just for myself to try to crystallize all this. And I'm very early in the stages of doing it, but I don't know, I got like maybe 4 or 5 books on it that cover it to some extent or other. And so my plan is to go through most of them and play it and then really try to learn it and just see because I've finally concluded that I can't memorize openings. I don't enjoy it. I just despise doing it. But maybe I don't have to if I can just kind of lean on these IQP positions and just be like, well, if somebody wants to out memorize me in opening line, so be it. They can have the win. But if I can get them in a position like this,
So you don't even have to grant them the win. You can say, all right, they may have a better
yeah, right,
early middle game. That's
right,
all they're going to get is a better early middle game, but that's not a win by any means.
yeah,
Anyway, all right, I got to run, Brock,
yep.
so we should plan to
So
edit this
we'll,
pretty
we'll
heavily
yeah,
because
we'll
we've been
sign
at it
off
for
here. We'll say
almost.
goodbye to the people watching, and then I'll just chat with you real fast. So, all right, take care, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it.
All right, thanks much.